Welcome to week 4 of Nursing 401. So week 4 consists of chapters 10, 11, and 12. I will be doing a separate video for each of those chapters, and I will be posting those on YouTube. Yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing. So we're going to start with chapter 10. And we'll just move through it. And then we're going to go do chapter 11 and 12. And this is for week 4. Your homework for chapters 10, 11, and 12 is due on April 6th, which is Monday, just like your student outline says. So here we go, chapter 10. I'm not going to go through the learning objectives because you can read through these yourselves. So we're going to start with communication. Communication is a reciprocal exchange of information, ideas, beliefs, feelings, and attitudes between two persons or among a group of persons. Those who work with the mentally or emotionally troubled individuals become highly skilled listeners. And the need for effective communication skills will never be replaced by technology. So remember, we have to become very highly skilled listeners, especially when we work with the mentally or emotionally troubled individuals. So we have to learn to become very highly skilled listeners who can plan and carry out interactions specifically designed to achieve client outcomes. Theories of communication, Florence Nightingale. She emphasized the need to effectively understand and communicate with patients. J. Roosh. He saw communication as a circular process in which messages traveled from within one person to another person and back again. The therapeutic communication is distinguished from ordinary communications by the intent of one of the participants to bring about a positive change. He also coined the term disturbed communications, which describes unsuccessful interactions that result from an interference in the sending or receiving of messages, inadequate mastery of the language being used, insufficient information, or no opportunity for feedback. According to Roosh, therapists direct communication to bring about more satisfying social relations, seek to find the nature of clients' distresses and problems, and then with the use of therapeutic communication techniques, both client and therapist agree on the nature of the problem and what should be done about it. And then we have Dr. Eric Bernay. I'm not quite sure how to say his last name, but we're going to go with Bernay. Sounds pretty good. He used transactional analysis to refer to the process of investigating what people say and do to each other. His main goal is to establish the most open and authentic communication possible between the affective or feeling and intellectual components of the personality. He also believed that 3 ego states exist within all of us. The parent, who focuses on rules and values, the child, who focuses on emotions and desires, and the adult, who bases his or her approach to the world on previous observations. So remember, he believed that 3 ego states exist within all of us: the parent and the child and the adult. These ego states make up one's individual personality, and he coined the term structural analysis to refer to the study of the personality. By learning an individual's communication patterns, one is able to achieve more effective and fulfilling interactions. Patterns include eye accessing clues, language patterns, and the pace and rhythm of speech. Other theories of communication focus on the following: focuses on the use of body language, focuses on how people use their space, and channels of communication. Human behaviors have a strong influence on communication, and individuals engage in two types of communication. You have intrapersonal and interpersonal. Intrapersonal take place within oneself and are commonly referred to as our self-talk or self-dialogue. Intrapersonal are adaptive when they help us cope or focus our energies. When dysfunctional, they can result in altered states of functioning, such as hallucinations. If upbeat and optimistic, interactions will be too. If self-talk is negative and gloom, communication will reflect it. And then we have interpersonal. That is where interactions that occur between two or more persons, the verbal and nonverbal messages that are sent and received during everyday interactions. So clear communication offers a greater chance of success in every interaction. Process of communication. I want you guys to know what the process of communication is. There are 5 elements that must be present for a successful communication. You have the sender, who forms the message and transmits the message. Then you have the receiver. That is someone who accepts the message and responds. And then you have perception. That is first, perception is needed to recognize the presence of a message. It is a use of the senses to gain information. Evaluation is the second step. That is the internal assessment of the message. The result is an emotional reaction to the message and preparation to return a message to the sender. And then you have transmission, which is your third step. That includes conscious and unconscious responses to the messages received. So perception, evaluation, and transmission are a chain of events that occur as a message is sent. Factors that affect our communication. Culture is most important. See box 10-2 on page 106. Communicating with clients of different social classes. Social class is another factor that affects communication or influences communication. Social class, profound influence on communications. Communicating with clients from different social classes requires effort and patience. Relationships affect communications because of the level of relationships of each person involved in the interaction. Perceptions, color communications, one internal experiences and personal values result in a unique frame of reference for communicating. And remember, it may be your perceptions that impede effective communications. Values also is a factor that influences communication and parts of the message. Content and context of a message have a strong impact on communication. Content of the message is the information being sent. Context is communications are affected by the context or the environment. Other factors that have an impact on communication is appearance, expressions, and body movements. So we have different levels of communication. Verbal communication. that is the most overt form of interaction. It relates to anything associated with a spoken word. This includes speaking, writing, the use of language and symbols, and the arrangements of words or phrases. Understanding verbal messages involves the ability to form abstract ideas and concepts, and verbal communication represents only a small part of an entire communication. So an example is a person experiencing hallucinations may be unable to understand a message is being sent because the communications within the inner world are drowning out the messages from the reality of the outside. Nonverbal communication. These are messages that are sent and received without the use of words. So messages can be sent at the nonverbal level or expressed in at least one of 4 different ways: appearance, body motions, use of space, and non-language sounds. So appearance sends a strong nonverbal message. Body motions, facial expressions, gestures, postures, and the use of the body can communicate one's emotion. Then the use of space. Remember, we have our personal space, intrapersonal space. So the use of space can also be one of the way that nonverbal messages are sent. And then non-language sounds, verbalizations without words. Intercultural communication. Intercultural differences, are needed to fulfill basic needs. People must interact and communicate with each other. Cultural communications may differ in terms of the following. It can differ in communication styles, nonverbal behaviors, values, and language. So communication styles, it can be linear or circular. It refers to the rituals connected with greeting and departure, the lines of conversation, and the directness of communication. Nonverbal behaviors can be eye contact, gestures, distance. Values, religious beliefs and practices affect communication. How individuals of various statuses should be treated because based on their values. And language, use of names and titles, structure of grammar, use of vocabulary, slang, voice qualities, tones, pronunciation, and their speed of communication. The goals of therapeutic communication are to focus on the client and foster the therapeutic relationship. Therapeutic communication techniques are divided into 2 areas, and each of them is vital if communications are to be clearly understood and therapeutic actions are to be successful. So the 2 areas are your listening skills and your interacting skills. So your listening skills, concentrate on the speaker, listen objectively, use appropriate eye contact and body language, remember speaker's cultural background. Make sure nonverbal messages match verbal messages. Do not interrupt. Make sure nonverbal messages match verbal messages. Follow up. Tell speaker when you will return to finish the conversation. And clarify. Clarify enhances caregivers' ability to successfully interact with clients. The art of listening is necessary for every healthcare provider, not just those who work in psychiatry. It improves the ability to meet the client's needs. So remember, the art of listening is necessary for every healthcare provider, not just those who work in psychiatry. Also, your interacting skills, your verbal and nonverbal responses should encourage clients to communicate in a way that encourages growth. On page 111, There are 12 commonly used therapeutic communication techniques, so you may want to take a look at that. They're important tools for effectively interacting with all clients. And then there are 8 principles of therapeutic communication. This is on page 109 or 110 in the book. This is not in the big textbook of nursing. This is in the mental health, the foundations of mental health care. So the 8 principles of therapeutic communication are acceptance, interest, respect, honesty, concreteness, assistance, permission, and protection. So non-therapeutic communication, messages that hinder effective communication, because those messages that hinder it can slow or halt the development of a helping relationship. And then barriers to communication, behaviors used when one feels threatened. The problem is their use can increase the client's insecurity and helplessness. And maybe the environment is too noisy or crowded. And incongruent communication. Incongruent communication is verbal messages do not match nonverbal messages. On page 113 of your book, if I am not mistaken, let me just double check that. There is different types of, it's page 112, 113. They talk about non-therapeutic communications. There's a table there, and there's also a table on page 113, table 10-3, speech patterns associated with psychiatric problems. So if you would just look through some of those, flight of ideas, just an example, shifts rapidly between unrelated topics. Mutism, they're able to speak, but they remain silent. Another one is parroting. That is on page 112. Parroting is continuous repeating of client's word. An example is client states, I haven't slept in 2 nights. Caregiver states, you haven't slept in 2 nights. What the better way to say that would be, what do you think is causing this? Instead of actually just repeating continuously what the client has stated. So look through both of those tables, page 112 and 113, and know what parroting means. The following are methods for coping with barriers to communication. We need to recognize that a problem exists. We need to identify purpose or the need the problem is filling. We need to explore appropriate alternative behaviors, implement alternative behaviors when interacting, and evaluate whether communications have improved. If they haven't improved, we need to reassess and try another approach. But we also need to be aware of barriers that allows us to intervene early and effectively. So part of it is, with non-therapeutic communication, are the problems, is it in omission or commission? Is it because we have a failure to listen or probe or explore the client's point of view? So, we need to make sure that we are very effective listeners. And, if one approach doesn't work, we have to be aware of that and try to intervene early and effectively and change our approach of how we communicate with our clients. So communicating with mentally troubled clients, problems with communication are common feature in many forms of mental illness and to communicate effectively with mentally and emotionally troubled clients, we have to realize that every interaction is a part of the total therapeutic process, and a climate of trust and respect must be established. We have to establish that trust and respect before clients feel safe enough to honestly share themselves. And clients need a routine, the security of a dependable environment, and care providers with calm, reliable temperaments. So they have to have a routine. One of the most important tools for communicating with mentally ill clients is therapeutic listening. So remember that we have to listen. We have to have excellent listening skills. Because like I said, mentally troubled clients find it difficult to develop trust. And loneliness is the companion of mental illness. So one of the best things we can do is learn how to listen therapeutically. And that is the end of chapter 10.